Now it's time for today's perspective, and today marks the 36th anniversary of the start of the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, the non-violent transition of power that led to the end of communism in the country, a pivotal moment in its history. Well, once again, Czechoslovakia is changing. Elections there won by the party of former Prime Minister Andrej Babis just over a month ago, as he now forms a government. Well, with me to discuss the latest is David Ondracka, consultant and author of the new book, The Case of the Czech Republic, How Billions Disappear and Why Our State Doesn't Work. He's also former head of Transparency International in the country. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme. Let's do the history bit first of all. 36th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. I mean, how important is it for you, for the country, you think, to remember the past?
Super important. This Velvet Revolution, that was a moment of recent history which really marked something specific. It was also, on one hand, unbelievable uprising of people who actually said enough, and it was also a moment of relief. People were fed up with this late communism. You have to imagine it as a kind of a super bureaucratic system, very inefficient. There was no freedom. People were not allowed to travel. And they had no chance to actually get their life, no chance to do business and something. But we still remember it as a moment which unified the country, and so that's why we celebrate it.
I mean, how much do you think of what happened then is still dominating the narrative, still affecting people's minds, I suppose, today?
Not that much, because it's not easy situation. The context is changing. We are 36 years after that, but I believe some ethos is still there. We believe that democracy, openness, and kind of freedom is really important. On the other hand, we lived through very difficult transition from communism to post-communism, which is complicated, with all this change of assets, with privatizations, with building of capitalism, with pros and cons. And also the democracy is very complicated and delicate matter, like in every country. So I believe we still mark it as a kind of very important moment in our history, Velvet Revolution. One more thing, we also have a divorce of Czechoslovakia 3 years later, which was a very friendly divorce, kind of like where you divide your kids and it's friendly. But at the same time, I believe we now have to look at the future and current situation and understand where this ethos actually went and whether we haven't lost it on the way.
Let's talk then about more modern times. I mean, more recently, really politics dominated, I suppose, by one man, Andrej Babis, a very right-wing politician. Where has that come from then?
It's a kind of a contextual thing, because Babis is one of the winners of this transition. He became multi-billionaire, one of the oligarchs who won through privatization. He controls large parts of the businesses, especially in chemical industry and agriculture, but he also owns media. And 12 years ago, he decided to jump into politics. So he built his own political vehicle. He's got all the resources in the world, and he dominates the game now. So imagine it's not something which would just emerge out of nothing, but like one super rich guy actually decided to go in politics himself. He succeeded. He first became finance minister, then prime minister, and then he lost. And surprisingly, now he made a kind of re-emergence. He won largely the recent elections, and he will become the new prime minister, which is the most powerful figure in the country politically. But it's also because others are weak enough to let him actually succeed, because like other parties actually don't deliver on their promises. They simply don't care that much about social affairs. They don't care about quality of public services. And of course, we live in a very complicated world. War in Ukraine, we had a lot of refugees from Ukraine. There is inflation, energy crisis, and stuff like this. But at the end of the day, if you want to succeed in politics, you have to actually deliver on your promises. And the previous government didn't, so Babis is back.
Yeah, I mean, when he lost, did you think there was ever a moment that he would come back?
That's also hard. I believe that he's done because he lost not only parliamentary but also then presidential elections. But he's got adaptability and some kind of lust for power, I would say. I know him personally, and he's not ideological guy. He's very simple. He's into power and money, right? Like that's what he cares. and to some extent also into immunity, because like there is also a lot of prosecution around his potential misuse of EU funds and subsidies. But like what I expect now is that we will get into a new form of government which will be more skeptical about Europe, but not anti-European, I guess, and definitely not pro-Russian. But I hope that they will also attack some of the basic pillars of the rule of law and institutions, which might be kind of dangerous. They won't care about civil society, about education, and I'm afraid that we are awaiting some years of stagnation.
So are there parallels, would you say, with Hungary, with Viktor Orban? Again, a very sort of within Europe, but against Europe type figure?
There are parallels with Hungary. On the other hand, Orban is an ideologue. He wants to have a great Hungary. This is not our Babis. I believe he wants just the money and power. But I also believe that the Czech institutions and civil society and checks and balances are in place so they can control and kind of offset these pressures. And I'm almost certain that there will be like public protest and say like if you go too far, there will be counter pressure. So we won't end up in this Hungarian scenario. But what is very likely is that like Babis will arrive to some EU summits and say like I have a veto and I want some money into my pocket. You know, that's very likely.
Corruption's still a major problem in the country.
Unfortunately, I worked on that issue for 20 years. I now wrote a book which actually tries to cover this post-communism, in perspective, and the problem is not one oligarch in politics, but rather oligarchy that controls the politics and controls the businesses. And then individual cases of corruption are kind of unavoidable. When you have a power which is kind of rigged and very concentrated, then it happens. The country is small. We, of course, it's very difficult to avoid some conflict of interest because everyone knows everyone. But I believe we have all institutions in place on one hand, but they are not as effective as they should be. Not only these repressive institutions and prosecutions, but also these preventive, so that the rules of the games are very clear. So, all in all, corruption is a major problem. I believe it really hinders our potential, and that's a shame, and that's why we should actually address it.
Just finally, I mean, Babis, going back to him, I mean, he's still loved by many people, isn't he?
Of course, he won legitimately, and the elections were not rigged. And he's got also some personal charm, I have to admit, that like some people actually buy it. But he's this kind of populist that can be whatever you want him to be, right? So you cannot really even say he's right-wing or left-wing, because tomorrow he changes his views. But some people are so fed up with current elites that they say like, let's give us something else. And he promises them maybe some unreal things, but that's enough. So, but all in all, and last sentence, I believe Czech Republic is strong enough and such a great country that it will survive whatever politicians, and we will move on, and I think this will be a good place to be.
Good to have you with us on the programme today. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. David Ondracka, consultant and author of the new book, The Case of the Czech Republic, How Billions Disappear and Why Our State Doesn't Work. Not in English yet, but I know you're hoping it will be. So do dig it out, have a look and see if you can find it.
Thank you for having me.
Future. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.